Hello! In our last session we created a blank but fully functional web application using the Yii command line. In this session we're going to look at the main configuration file and update it for things like database access, URL management and logging. So let's open our first application configuration file. I've set up a new project in NetBeans with the home directory pointing to my project root directory. We'll find the config file in protected config main.php. Base path sets the base path of the application component and should point to the protected directory. But as we've restructured our directories, we need to paste in a little bit of extra code here to tell the system where our web root and our runtime paths are. Name, here we can set the name of the application, which can be used in the site layouts as a heading using Yii app name. Yii uses the auto-loading features available since PHP 5.3. Other Yii core components are preloaded automatically at application load, so we don't need to worry about those here. Import. The import function scans the specified directories and files. The class files will only be loaded when they're first required, and not before. Modules within Yii are self-contained semi-autonomous applications. That is, they don't need to relate to your application, but your application may relate to them. G, here we're going to enable G, as we'll be needing it in the next session to generate our base application. It's not recommended to activate G on a production website. Components are the fundamental building blocks of Yii, and will be an instance of the C component base class. No changes to make to the user. The URL manager, we briefly discussed URL management during the session on MVC information flow, and there I mentioned that we're going to modify the default URL structure to something more user-friendly and SEO-friendly. Well, this is where we're going to do that. So the default URL looks something like this, and we're going to change it to look more like this. So we uncomment the block of code here, and then we add script name false to remove the index.php part of the URL. And we're not going to change the rules, we'll keep the default rules as this is in the format that we're looking for. Database. We're not going to use SQLite, we're going to use MySQL. So we need to create a new database, and I'm going to use SQL but you can use any MySQL tool like phpMyAdmin or the MySQL command line. And I've created a separate user in MySQL called Photo. Within SQL I create a new blank database, and I'm going to call it Photo Gallery. We then go back to our config file, and we use these parameters to populate the Yii config. So the database name is Photo Gallery, the username Photo, and then we use the password for this user, which is Photo21. And then I'm going to add two more parameters to enable SQL logging, and that will dump PDO parameters out with our SQL statements in the log files. Error handling is the URL of the default error handling form, and we'll leave that as it is. Logging, we can set up different routes to output different information. Here we see a file log route, which is outputting errors and warnings. We're going to uncomment the C weblog route and output info, errors and warnings to the C weblog route, which is displayed at the bottom of the web page and is very useful for instant debugging. And then we are going to add trace information to the log file route. So if we want to look at more detailed debugging information, we can go to the log file. If you're a Firefox user, you might want to check out the Firefox debug extension. And then lastly, parameters. We can define here system-wide parameters, which you would access using Yii app params parameter name.